Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's session on our journey to mental health, brought to you by Mood Disorder Society of Canada, sponsored by the Royal Canadian Legion Dominion. And I will now hand it over to our facilitator, Debbie Turner, Director of Veteran and First Responder Programs. Off to you, Debbie.
Thanks, Diana, and welcome all to the first of three live seminars hosted by the Mood Disorders this winter. And as Diana has said, a special thank you to our sponsor, the Royal Canadian Legion Dominion Command. So let's start off by honoring the territory. We acknowledge that we live, work, meet, and travel on the unceded traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. They are the traditional guardians of this land that we call Canada. We value their wisdom, we honor, and we respect them. So let's move over to a few housekeeping items. So you'll notice that your microphones are muted as the session is being recorded. And that session will be out on the Mood Disorder Society of Canada's website within the next couple of days. While the chat function is currently disabled, we will be sharing an anonymous survey link through the chat towards the end of the hour. And so by now, you all know that MDSC has been providing Canadians from coast to coast with mental health services and supports for well over 20 years. We're currently offering 8 unique services and supports for veterans and their family members for free. Please ensure that you check our website out if you're not aware of all 8. And without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to our seminar host, Michael Landsberg. Over to you, Michael.
Well, thank you very much, Deb. And thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this. Mood Disorder Society is something very important to me. Mental health talk is really outside of still sports talk for recreation. Mental health talk is my life, really. And what's fascinating is that it all happened after a lifetime of anxiety, 10 years of depression. One moment on television changed the course of my life. And that one moment on television, talking to a famous hockey player, is the reason why I'm here today. Now, I think you want to know what that is, right? That moment? Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you in a second. Jody, you're up.
I'm a long-serving Canadian Armed Forces sergeant, now retired after 38 years in the military. And in that transition from leaving the military, I decided to go back to school to get my degree in psychology with a minor in anthropology. And today I work with Veterans Housing, the Royal Canadian Legion, as a service officer to help our veterans. And I really enjoy that. There's a mixed bag of people.
And Jim, let's briefly hear
Okay.
your story before we hear it a little more extensively.
Okay. Hi, my name's Jim Tolmie. I retired after 40 years of military service as a master warrant officer in the medical branch as a physician assistant. I have extensive travel throughout the country, Canada, and a tour in Bosnia and Azerbaijan. It was called Partnership for Peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Can you keep me honest here? And by well, that sounds like a pretty broad term. You're going to make an honest man out of me. But I know that you want me to speak for about 20 minutes right now, and sometimes I lose track of time. One time I was on stage giving a talk to a group of people, and I lost track of time, and I talked for 7 hours. So we don't want that to happen, and that did never happen. But I thought it sounded like a good story to start with. So Deb, just keep me posted on the time. Feel free, anybody who's in on this conversation, to jump in and ask me a question at any time, because This is, for me, is what I do, right? And talk about mental health, talk about my own mental health, talk about my journey. The title for this is Transition to Civilian Life After Decades of Service. I didn't serve in the traditional sense, but I totally fit that description. And I've never talked about this before. It's all reasonably recent in my life, but I spent every day of my professional life doing some kind of sports TV show on TSN, and that was really my adult life. The only thing I ever knew and I ever did was television, and I really worked hard over the course of my career not to let myself be defined by my job. And the day that I left television to talk about mental health full time, the day I left TSN, was like Judgment Day for me, because it was like, okay, were you successful in not allowing yourself to feel like you were judged and defined by your job? And I was so conscious of that because I knew one day I wouldn't be doing it. And that if I saw myself as Michael Landsberg, the broadcaster, Michael Landsberg, the TV host, if I saw myself as that, then ultimately, what would I be afterwards? Where would I be? Who would I be? And I have found that the most important thing in life really is to, in this context, is to not force yourself to live as someone you used to be. Now, I don't know if that makes sense because it sounds kind of convoluted, but I desperately tried not to become a person who was living based on who I was. And I'm really happy to say that I was successful in that, I no longer see myself or ever saw myself really as a host. I always saw myself as Corey and Casey's dad, Karen's husband, Ron and Annalee's son. And I think that that is something that I really wanted to share because I think it's reflection of the struggles that many of us have in our lives. And that is, we go from one thing to another. I mean, the two people that are here today, Jody and Jim, served for so long. And I'm really interested to hear how they made the transition and how they help others with the transition. So let's go back before my transition. I need to share with you my past when it comes to mental health. And I need to do that because I'm not a veteran, right? So I'm not here for a logical reason. I battled anxiety all my life. My earliest memories are ones of being anxious, not anxious like nervous, oh, I have a test coming up, but just obsessed with fears that other kids didn't have. And if I could have heard others speak about the same challenges that I was going through, say when I was 12 years old, if I would have heard somebody else talking about it, that would have been like, oh my God, I can't believe it. There's somebody else in this world who's going through what I'm going through. But I never heard another person talk about it. I never spoke about it. I just sucked it up. And was fortunate enough to be in a household where I was adored by my parents, fortunate enough to have married a woman who adores me and I adore her and gave me the support in every aspect of my life, which I think allowed me to cope with this anxiety that was with me all the time, like every second. There were things I wouldn't do as a kid because of this anxiety. And that, I have found, is the reason why I fell into this awful, awful depression. That when my anxiety got so out of control, it had no place to go. And it just started to suck me down into this hole of depression, this deep, dark hole where you look up and you go, I can't see a way out. And that was me. And what I really learned was that trauma in one's life, and I was going to say a student of World War II. I mean, not a student. I don't go to school. I'm just fascinated by it. It's kind of my hobby. And I have learned so much from that trauma that happens in war is one thing. And I just used to assume that post-traumatic stress disorder, for instance, was for people in the military, firefighters, police, that you had to see and experience these awful things to go through it. But when we had our second child, Casey, when she was 3.5, she was diagnosed with a serious eye condition. And from that moment on, my anxiety level went from here to here. Not that this actually means anything. You're not going to yourself, oh my God, his anxiety went up 4 inches. That must be terrible. No, but it increased because I started to worry about her all the time. And at different times, that worry went from here to someplace way up there. Because I had no coping skills for my anxiety, and I had no way to stop obsessing about it. And I carried that through for a lot of years. And when it got particularly severe, when Casey had a bad year, I was in the midst of doing Off the Record. And I was really, 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 really struggling. I'd fallen into this depression a number of times. My first one was probably around 1998. And it was this recognition that, first of all, you can battle mental illness without knowing you're battling mental illness, which sounds really weird, but it's true, right? We haven't lived in anyone else's brain. We don't know, is that depression I'm feeling? Is that what other people feel? You have no idea unless you hear someone talk about what that experience is like. It's not the clinical description. It's the lived experience description of what mental illness like depression is like that you need sometimes to be able to say, I think that's me. So I had struggled for a while. I heard my father-in-law, who I adored, say, I think Michael's changed more than anyone I've ever heard. And I thought, or ever seen. And I thought, what's he talking about? Have I changed? No, I haven't changed. And then I started to look back at the previous 6 months of my life. And I realized that I was stopping to do things. I was basically retreating. I was not looking for conversations, but I was looking for ways out of conversations. I'd stopped doing the things that I used to enjoy. And when I did the things that I used to enjoy, I no longer felt the joy. So I came to the conclusion, oh my God, he's right. And that was my first acknowledgement of depression. I'm going to fast forward because I don't have time to tell you, because I know Deb's just waiting to go. Michael, you've reached the limit. I know you're out there, Deb. Fast forward now to 1998, not 98, 2008, I'm sorry. And I'd had a really particularly bad year with depression. And I was really, really sick. I'd been on medication before. Medication helped me. Like everybody who's been on medication, I decided I'm going to go off meds. I don't need the meds. And then I went off and I relapsed and then I went off again. And that got me to 2008 when we'd all had a really tough year in my family. And I knew that I was in this hole. And my wife kept telling me, you know, you've got to go back for treatment. And like everybody, I didn't want to go back for treatment. I didn't want to be on medication. I thought, okay, I'm just going to plow through this, which was a really stupid thing to do because I knew better. But then I just kept falling into this hole. And in one moment in particular was almost life-changing. Well, it was life-changing for me and almost life-ending for me. We were shooting Off the Record, the show that I hosted in Montreal at the Grey Cup. I have this tattoo on my arm, which is memorializing this moment, 11/24/08 YUL MH5210400, November 24th, 2008, Montreal, Marriott Hotel Room, 5:21, 4 a.m. I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought, I know why people take their own lives. And it wasn't that I didn't love my life. It wasn't that I didn't love my wife and my family and all the things that I got to do and that I wasn't thankful for all those things. But I was in so much pain. The thought of working through the next day, living with this pain that I was experiencing was way more frightening for me than the thought of dying. Now, I had one thing that many people don't have. I had hope because I had been through it before. I had gone off medication and gone on medication. I'm not here to be an advocate for meds, right? I mean, there's my only thing that I advocate for is to do something. If you're struggling, do something. Start somewhere. Talk to someone. But for me, medication was really good. So I knew that I had been through it before. I knew that 3 times I got off medication. So here I was in the Marriott Hotel Room, 5:21 at 4 a.m. I was sitting there and I thought, I have a little hope that if I go back on meds, I won't be in this hole and this pain will at least partially go away. And I think it's important because to realize that depression is this glass half empty illness. So you might say, well, like, why wouldn't you know that meds were going to help you? The problem is that depression makes you see everything in a negative way. It takes away all the sunshine in your life and just leaves you in this darkness where you believe nothing good will happen to you. So here I was, after being through it 4 times, I knew intellectually that medication could help me. But emotionally, my depression kept telling me, you won't get better. This is all you have. You have to live with this the rest of your life. And that's why I sat on the edge of my bed and thought, okay, I understand suicide. And when I got back from Montreal after that, and this was crazy, right? I'm hosting the show. And one of the things that depression does to us, it robs us of our self-esteem. Not some of us, all of us. I've given 150 talks. I ask audiences all the time, how many of you have not felt this? The loss of self-esteem when it comes to depression. And every single person, no one has put up their hand. We all go through it. So here I was living without the belief in myself. And that put me in a place where everything I did, I hated. I could look into a TV camera and be talking about, I know, Jim, you're a Leaf fan. I could be talking about, oh my God, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh, what a disastrous season. I could be talking about it in a way that people would think, okay, well, he's just himself. But in my head, I'd be thinking, you're awful, Michael. Oh my God, this is terrible. You really, really, really suck at this. That's what I heard over and over and over again, because depression has a voice. And it tells us all the things we don't want to hear. And it knows us because it is us. So I hear in my head, and you would hear something different if you were experiencing depression, because you have different things that are priorities for you. So for me, performing on television was a priority. And I just kept hearing over and over again, oh my God, Michael, you're just, you've lost it. You shouldn't be doing this. And that is kind of a hard way to live. And the only way to get rid of that voice in your head is to treat the illness. So 2009, I'm getting to this moment now where I teased it before, where my life changed. So 2009, I've never spoken about depression on television because I never thought that there was a purpose. I had no idea that there was a stigma, which doesn't bode well for my intelligence, I don't think. If Michael, did you not know? So we had a guest on the show, Stéphane Richer, former Montreal Canadian, last Montreal Canadian to score 50 goals, Stanley Cup champion for the Montreal Canadiens, rookie of the year in the NHL. And I said to him, Stéphane, you've never met me before. This was before the show. But would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing with depression? Because I know during your career, you battled. And he said, I'd rather not talk about it. And I said, I'm glad I asked you in advance, but would it help if I talked about it? And he said, what would you talk about? So I told him a little bit about my story. And he said, okay, let's do it. We went on the air. He talked for about a minute. His assessment of what depression was brilliant. He said, imagine a Canadian kid, grew up in Montreal, drafted by the Montreal Canadiens, rookie of the year in the NHL, 50 goals in the NHL, Stanley Cup champion for the Montreal Canadiens. And I got no joy whatsoever. None. Nothing I did brought me joy. The only thing I ever wanted to do was go home and go to bed. And I thought, wow, that's depression, right? The loss of the ability to experience joy. The circumstances that go around you, that are going on around you, have nothing to do with the joy that you feel because you've lost that ability to feel joy. And all I said to him was, well, Stéphane, thank you for that. I mean, wow. And there's at least one other person on this set, on this show, who understands what you're talking about, who has battled depression like you. And that's me. And that's all I said. And that changed the course of my life, because after the show was over, I started getting emails from people, almost all of them basically saying that was the first time in my life I've seen two men talking about depression or mental illness. And like you, Michael, this is what I read. I have battled depression, but unlike you, I never went for help. But I will now, because hearing the two of you guys talk about it without shame, without embarrassment, and without sounding, here's the key word in all of getting rid of the stigma, the key word, without sounding weak. Because you didn't sound weak, I'm now going to go for help because I guess if you didn't sound weak, maybe I won't sound weak. Weakness, the perception of weakness. I mean, that's why we named our charity Sick Not Weak, because mental illness, like depression, like anxiety, like OCD, like all of those in that family of illnesses, illness, not weakness. And that's one of the reasons why people who come from, like this world that Jim and Jody have lived in, and many of you watching have lived in the military, where showing weakness, physical weakness, is the last thing that you ever want to do. So you get into normal life outside of that, and you try to apply the same thoughts to that, the same not being weak. And when you're struggling, you can't accept the fact that maybe your struggle is a mental illness, because in your mind, mental illness means weakness. So that was the change in my life. I started hearing from people saying it made a difference, and that was a total shock to me, because I wasn't talking about it on that day to make a difference in anyone's life. I was just talking about it because I wanted Stefan to talk about it, and I think I've spoken about it every day since. And I think that what I have learned is the universality of mental illness. Now, this has been scientifically, okay, that's an exaggeration, it wasn't scientific, but I have given all these talks, and I've always asked people, if you haven't felt what I felt, please put up your hand and tell me. And no one has ever done it. There's something we all feel, and I mentioned it before, loss of self-esteem, but first and foremost, the loss of the ability to experience joy. It's not that you can't do fun things when you have depression. It's not like you can't win the lottery when you have depression, right? Your chances don't go down. And if you win the lottery, if you go, I won $10 million, oh my gosh, that's great. Intellectually, you would say this is an amazing thing. But emotionally, you couldn't feel it because you're sick, because you've lost the ability to feel joy. And conveying that to people is like opening up a door to them and saying, it's okay for you to say what you're experiencing, because I'm experiencing the same thing. Mental illness, depression, has some things that are just universal. And when people know that, all of a sudden now, they don't feel quite as abandoned by the world. It's not about the number of people around us. I mean, I remember when I was at my sickest going to a wedding for my wife's family. And I remember going to the washroom and just standing in the washroom. And I did that because I felt like I was in a room and I was the only one. I felt like no one could possibly understand what I was feeling. It's not the number of people around us. You can be in a crowd and still feel isolated. It's finding one person who understands us. One person can make all the difference. And that's why I think, what Jim and Jody are doing and what Mood Disorders does every single day is it allows you to look at other people and think, yeah, me too. Powerful words. Me too. Time, Deb? How are we doing here?
You're doing great. You've got 5 more minutes. If you
5 more minutes. Okay. So you hold me to that time.
Okay, well.
Because when you work in television, you wear an earpiece called an IFB, and you always have someone in your ear telling you different things, telling you where to look, but also telling you time. A TV show that's 30 minutes has to end exactly in 30 minutes. So feel free to actually count me down and I will hit it bang on, because I did a lot of TV and I learned how to take account. Okay. One of the things that we all make the mistake, and I think the stigma in a lot of ways is really based on the concept that we treat mental illness like physical illness. I think that's at the heart of the stigma. The belief that you can treat something like depression like you treat something like a physical injury, for instance. I call it Superman syndrome, or super person syndrome, I guess. I think men fall into it, are more prone to it, but it's this idea that I'm strong and I never miss days of work, right? I show up every single day. And one day I showed up, I was having an appendix attack. I also had, I had strep throat. And I had all these horrible things that were going on, and I still showed up for work, which is okay if that's the way you are. But when you apply that to mental illness, when you say, I'm just going to suck it up and keep going and not be anyone's problem, that's when you start sliding deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole, because mental illness is not the same as physical illness. And if you think it is, if you treat it like it is, that's the stigma, the perception that they're one and the same. And they're not. Mental illness typically doesn't go away on its own. You need to acknowledge the fact that answering this one question, does my mental illness allow me to live, or sorry, my mental health allow me to live my best life? That's simple. Does my mental health allow me to live my best life? And if the answer is, I don't know, or if the answer is no, definitely not, then you got to do something about it. Because if you felt crappy every day you woke up for the last year, I'm pretty sure tomorrow when you wake up, you'll feel crappy. You need to take action. You need and you deserve to live your life in the best way possible, not limited by your mental health, not limited by what mental illness does to us. And my realization of that a long time ago drives me to say that every single day, you need to fight. You need to do anything in your power to get this, or get out of, I guess you would say, like the deep, dark hole of mental illness. And I'm happy to say that I'm out of the deep, dark hole of mental illness. Sometimes I fall back into it. But when I fall back in, I'm just at the surface almost. Like I'm on medication still. I have been on the same medication every day since 2008, when I had this experience. And when I'm on meds, which again, I'm not advocating necessarily medication, but when I'm on meds, I find that my worst days aren't terrible. It's like everything gets narrowed, this range of emotion. So instead of being a 0 on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe on a bad day, I'm a 4.5, which I can tolerate because I know what a 0 feels like. But unfortunately, on a good day, I'm a 7.5 tops. So I live my life in this narrow range, and I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I know what the illness is. I don't like medication, but I hate the illness. I have learned to love what I hate the least. Unravel that on your spare time. I've learned to love what I hate the least. And I believe my time, Deb, is probably winding down.
It is.
Oh, sure. I knew you would jump in. Michael, your time's up. I knew you were just waiting to do that, Deb. So I would like to hear what the others have to say. Starting with you, Jody. First of all, I don't know if you have a question for me, hearing me yap on for that. If you do, feel free to ask it, but I know I have lots of questions for you.
Well, Michael, you put a lot into that, into your story that is powerful, and it covers everybody. In the military, I'm a long-term serving member, 38 years. I did 10 years as military police, and then I transferred over and did the rest in administration and finance. But in admin and finance, you still got to do, you're a soldier first. And with that and the long-term service, and you probably see this in the sports world, that transition can be quite...
Absolutely.
Quite, I don't know the word.
Oh,
damaging.
It's traumatic.
Difficult. It can be.
Yeah.
So in the military, I found that you had a purpose, you had identity, you had structure, you had camaraderie, your brotherhood, your sisterhood. And all through those years, it was little traumas here, little traumas there, and it built up. And then all of a sudden you find yourself on your retirement day, and the next day it all disappears. So a lot of people, and Jim can speak to this from his medical standpoint, you don't know who you are. Your friends disappear, they get posted away, and you lose contact. So all of a sudden you find yourself quite alone. and you fall into depression and you fall into grief, and throughout your military career, all those little traumas, because our soldiers get deployed a lot. So marriages end, children don't want to be a part of you, and all those come to a head on your, at least 2, 3 months down past your retirement age. And so you have a lot of grief there. And grief, I find, is a transition in itself. It's the space between who you were allowed to be and now who you have not yet learned who to be. So I had to learn who I was when I was younger. All I wanted to do was be in the military. I must have saw a World War II movie also and said, that's who I want to be. And now I got to find myself. And it was a struggle. I would go to job interviews and the first thing I'd say, what's your experience? Well, I did 38 years in the military. And I saw the interviewer's eyes go down to the left, and I knew I lost that interview right there, because things like you talked about, the stigma, well, you're military, you must have PTSD. Everybody in the military has a form of anxiety. We saw some pretty crappy stuff. Even if you weren't deployed, some of our training, like James can probably attest to, like going through our combat first aid training, some of those films and stuff, I mean, they all stick in your head.
Can I ask you, can I jump in, Jody, please?
Yes.
Because, what you just described, I'm sure would get a lot of this. Me too. So how do you use your experience in this transition in life and going from one day being part of this massive team, camaraderie, all the things you described, to not having any of that? How do you help people? How do you use your own experience?
Well, what brought me out of, like, I hit a low at one time, much like most people. What I told myself, because in grief and in depression, we get a lot of intrusive thoughts. A lot of intrusive thoughts tend to come into your mind and has nothing to do with your past or your future. Because grieving is, you grieve a lot. Big part of grieving is what could have been, or you know, what could have
Yep.
been. So I decided one day I can't stay this low, this unhappy. And I relate to you not feeling joy, because some things happen that I should be elated about. And it was like, so one day I gave myself an 8-word sentence, and it's, I allow myself to be unfinished. I give myself permission to be unfinished.
And what did that mean when you say, I allow myself to be unfinished?
It's, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be what other people say. I take away that stigma that I have to be happy, that I have to be on top of the world, that I have to greet everybody with the same smile. I can be unfinished, and I can talk about it. So, like, much like James, I do these companion callings, and some of the first words that come out of people's mouths is, I'm broken. You're not as broken as you think. You're telling yourself you're broken, but you're not. Let's focus on the good thoughts. Let's focus on your accomplishments. Sometimes that accomplishment is just opening the door. If someone has agoraphobia, to go out, just open the door, take 2 breaths, and then close it. Well done. tell yourself, well done.
I have thought about that so many times, that you need to find a way to celebrate your small steps, because there's
Yes,
no like one step to feeling better about yourself. There's no one step to curing the mental health problems. I call it proud of the shower. If you took a shower, be proud. No one who hasn't been through it would ever say, "Oh my God, I'm so proud of myself. I took a shower today." But for those of us that have had trouble
that's a big step.
imagining taking a
So I've
shower, be
allowed,
proud.
yes, so I've allowed to give myself courage to let the old identity die off, enjoy what was, and now I get to move on, and it's exciting. It's a new path. It's like taking a new road trip.
Very cool. Jim, I know that from us talking, um, we were talking about little steps.
Mhm.
Like if you want to feed the ducks, maybe you're not going to get out to feed the ducks. Maybe you need a step along the way, right?
Right.
You had that experience, right?
Definitely. For me, when I came back from a tour uh, in Bosnia, I was home, and like Jody was saying, all of a sudden, wow, I just came from an area that was, under a lot of issues, and I had some responsibility. I was in charge of 65 medical personnel, and all of a sudden, I'm like Jody said, I was a nobody. Where's my purpose in life? And I struggled with that, trying to find myself and not being able to. I started to do things like isolate. I was doing, yeah, that I think that was the biggest one, and just falling away from people that were around me, and not being able to really communicate with them. I went and struggled through a divorce as a result of it, and all of a sudden I'm in a tent in a park in the city I'm at, and I spent 2 months there, afraid to come out in the evening because there was sounds that I was hearing that, when I was in all of my positions in the field, I would sleep outside on a cot and in my sleeping bag. I had no fear, but I was all of a sudden all these things stepping out of my house, looking at my car and saying, "I got to get to my car." And uh, you know, I'm thinking there's some sort of uh, entity or person is going to jump out and attack me. It was, and I struggled with trying to understand that, and there was a lot of denial for sure. Like, come on, you're bigger than this. You're a sergeant major. Wow, that's pretty. Nothing like that at all. And in looking back at that, maybe if I would have opened up and had somebody to say, Jim, why don't you put on those boots and take that walk to the duck pond? Things would have been different. In terms of your struggle, I mean, and being in the position that you were in, that must have been a bit of a challenge as well, was it?
No, not a bit. And I'll explain to you why. I never felt I never felt the stigma. Everybody in my life knew that I was battling depression. Everybody in my life knew that I was on medication when I was on medication, and everybody in my life knew when I was really, really struggling. So I never thought, like, what are they going to think of me? And when I went on TV and talked about it for the first time, I didn't think for a second, like, how are people going to react? What's my boss going to think? Are people going to see me in a different way and stop watching? I just, was lucky enough never to feel that.
Right.
And the fact that others do, the fact that still, like, if I, like you, and Jody, if you give a talk about mental health, people look at you and think to themselves, wow, that person is really strong. That's the ironic thing, Jim, is that the person who talks about their mental illness is the one that looks really strong as opposed to the ones that cover it up. So I kind of always saw it that way. I always liked the idea of being able to share what I'd experienced and never saw it in any way as being a weakness. So I never feared the repercussions of saying this. My name is Michael Landsberg. I battle an illness called depression and anxiety. Those two illnesses have robbed me a lot in my life. I have understood the bottom. I know why people take their own lives. I'm on medication the rest of my life, but I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed, and I'm not weak. And Jim, from the first time I ever said anything like that, I never cared what others would think. And I think that's contagious, right? You hear someone else do it and you go, oh, okay, well, he just said it and he didn't sound like he was weak. He didn't sound like he was a loser. And I think that's the power that you and Jody have, is that you, in talking about this, people knowing you obviously are both people of great strength, but that you have battled mental health issues. The fact that you're strong and still have been vulnerable to that proves that strength has nothing to do with it.
No, I 100% I agree. And I think, as well, giving yourself forgiveness for it's not my fault. I was constantly battling in my mind, why am I like this? Why me and why not the person beside me? I'm certain they're a heck of a lot weaker than me. Why is it me? And and being in the healthcare field, it was. It was it wasn't even part of my thinking, that I knew there was something not happening, and maybe it was denial, not being able to accept it, and having that all those losses, all those people that I was tethered to as well.
So just clarify for us, because I threw it out
Yep.
there, the thing about the ducks, because you had told
Yeah.
us a story
Yeah.
before we actually came on. People should
Yeah.
understand that you were assisting
A
a
veteran.
person.
Yep.
And tell
Yeah.
us the story,
Yeah,
because I
for
think
sure.
that story is one where you go, wow, I can learn from that.
Yeah. No, I was meeting with somebody, and they were veterans and retired, and um, they were kind of really sheltered in. They didn't want to do anything outside at all. And I talked to them over a couple of weeks, and I had thrown that out it was just an afterthought. It wasn't even I didn't even know at the time whether it was going to do anything, but it was saying, if that's your routine, let's get you back on that routine. Putting your boots on, putting your coat, or gathering whatever it was that you needed. And the next time I went, or next time I connected, uh, there was a joy that was beyond anything that I was expecting, and same with this person, that they had gone and did that thing that they got so much joy from.
And that was, you said to them, what brings you joy? And
Yeah,
she said, feeding the ducks.
correct.
She also told you that she wasn't able to go out of the house to feed the ducks because of her struggle. And you told
Exactly.
her, put your boots on,
Yeah,
start with that,
yeah,
and then think about the next step. And I think that's like as good advice as anyone who has a PhD in psychology. You went back to school, right? And well, I know you
yeah,
went back to
yeah. I
school.
did. Yeah, I grateful. I did a 3-year degree at Emmanuel Bible College in Kitchener, and it was behavioral addiction and addiction counseling skills. And I'm currently I do this free of charge. I really enjoy giving back. So that's yeah, that's but it was interesting. In the classroom one day, my one of the students tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Jim, what are you doing here?" And I looked at him. I said the same thing you are. It was I didn't mean. I said it's okay, don't worry. But yeah, I'm here. Same reason you are, buddy.
Yeah.
It wasn't insulting or anything that I accepted it. Yeah.
Jody, you went back to school too, right? And if I remember correctly, you studied psychology and anthropology. Um,
Right. Yes.
Unlike me, I went to University of Toronto for 3 years and I took every course imaginable looking for one that I could pass. Not really successful on that. And it's funny in life because I look back and I read that you studied anthropology and I realized I only took that course because I thought I could pass it because people said, oh, it's an easy course. But now I'd love to go back and learn the things that I could have learned back in that time. And, that was all part of your transition, right? Of getting
Mhm.
back
Yep.
to something fresh and new where you could say, okay, I was that, I am this.
Yes. Well, after several disappointing job interviews, I had to give myself an anchor point, and that was enroll in school, do something because you're going downhill. Because after interview, and this the civilian world not really understanding the skill set that a military person can bring to their organization, uh, it was a lot of stigma, and it brought me down. So I used something, and in my case, it was schooling that anchored me to a purpose.
Great lessons from both of you. It's like like you've walked the walk, and now you're talking about the walk as you
Mhm.
talk the talk. I just adapted an old saying to something new. Okay, I
Yeah.
wasn't the best work that I've done, but it wasn't bad. Deb, anything or Diana, anything that anyone would like to ask?
Well, I have one question that we've received in, and that's I'll open it up for the three of you. Knowing what you know now, would you or could you have changed your transition to mental health along the way?
I think let's go to Jody first. I'm going to guess yes. I'm sure, knowing what you know now, you would have prepared yourself in a different way for post-military life.
Absolutely, because you learn a lot in the military, but what they don't teach you is how to have a second career, or how to uh, navigate not being the identity you associated yourself with for so many years. So if I had to go back, I would go up to the military advisors and career counselors that, give the soldier more training in the afterlife.
Yeah,
of
that's a great way to put it. The afterlife. Jim, I'm sure you would be the same way. I mean, you've learned so much about this, and it was a struggle for you. So,
Mhm.
if you went back and you could coach yourself through it, what would you tell yourself?
Well, certainly, first of all, that I could do it, and it's doing that first step, making that first step, and just continue that moving forward is so important, and and understand that there's going to be potential obstacles, but unlike the ones that in my mind I thought I had. That they're easily managed with the proper counseling, or if it was a education, certainly going to the prof and making sure that you're doing it right. I do remember my first month. It was pretty hectic with all these young students there, and there was two gray hairs in the in the class. So, it was well worth it, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't have made that first step.
Speaking of first step, I mean, I don't know if that was like your sort of cue to me to remind me that there's a program that's available to great veterans like the two of you, and it's something that we did based on my own experiences. So if you're
Mhm.
saying to yourself, "Man, I'm so tired of hearing Landsberg speak, even over this past hour," don't go there. But if you want to hear somebody else's experiences and learn potentially some things that I've learned, check it out. And
Mhm.
I think it's just so important, not that it's me, but for somebody to say something that if you're in that hole, that you go, kind of sounds like me. That's the real
Mhm.
power. And by the way, I know you're a hockey fan. I asked this to so many ex-hockey players.
Yeah.
How do you replace stepping onto the ice on a Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada? At Scotiabank or back in the day at Maple Leaf Gardens. How do you replace that? That excitement, that energy.
Mhm.
Like how do you not live thinking back to how much fun that was? And the answer I got from a lot of people was, I never did. It's like my life when I retired from hockey was never the same and was never as good. And that's exactly what the two of you were talking about. You have to prepare for it. You have to prepare for life after whatever it is that you are living. And for me, it was life after TV. For the two of you, it was life after military life.
Yep.
Deb?
Definitely.
That's great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate your candid discussion, Jim, Jody, and Michael. So with that, I just want to bring up, are there any last thoughts before we summarize and end the session?
Yeah, I would like to say, I think it's important that for all those that are out there, check out the Mood Disorder Society of Canada's website. We're always looking for volunteers to help out, and it's brought a heck of a lot of joy into my life. Post military, that I get to work with military and post military vehicles, or personnel. So please do. We can use your help.
Thanks, Jim. Jody, any last thoughts?
I would just like everybody to know that you're stronger than you believe you are.
Hmm.
And, you know, if you have to remain unfinished for a while, that's okay. Find your anchor point, take your best hobbies, make it work for you because it can.
I just hearing Jim and Jody talking about it, and what they have benefited from mood disorders and what they have benefited from working with veterans in different aspects of their life. It's purpose to pain, right? I will show up in a small town that I'd never heard of. And I'll be standing in front of 300 people that I have very little in common with. And I'm speaking and I'm thinking to myself, this is purpose to pain, right? I'm here because I get to use the worst thing in my life, which has been mental illness, as the best thing in my life, which is sharing it. So, yeah, volunteer, share your experience, and put that pain to good use.
That's very powerful, Michael. Thank you for sharing that. And Jody and Jim, thank you both for sharing your stories. I know sometimes it's difficult to share, but it can also be like a bird flying free.
Yeah.
So thank you all. Appreciate that.
I have to interrupt and say what a pleasure it was to be on with Jody and Jim, and how I kind of feel like I don't even belong here, given the service that they gave to this country and the just what they have brought to people. My story pales by comparison to theirs, but I'm the average person, and they're the not average. And I think it's important to hear from both.
Thank you for those closing words, Michael. Appreciate that. So let's just move on and just do a quick summary and a recap on what's next. So your feedback is extremely important to us, and we're asking you to complete the anonymous survey in the chat before you leave. And if you haven't already done so, I mentioned at the top of the hour that this is the first of 3 seminars that we will be presenting live. The next seminar is scheduled February the 18th, and it's going to feature Dr. Don Richardson from London. He's going to tell us about recent advances and treatment in research, and that will be a little bit later, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern. And all of our seminars are going to be recorded. And just to finalize, a special thank you to the Royal Canadian Legion Dominion Command for their sponsorship of this series. And with that, I'd like to say have a great day to everyone that took the time to attend with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
Jody. Thanks, Deb.
Bye, folks.
Thank you all for watching.